So guys, today we are doing another sort of famous landmark sketch. Of course, I am Toby from Toby's Urban Sketch, and so when I asked you guys for ideas, I had all these urban places, a little cute cafe bakery in America and this kind of thing, and you voted for Stonehenge. So Stonehenge, that classic urban, I guess maybe it's a Neolithic urban site. Let's say it's a Neolithic urban site. As ever with this series, as I said, this is voted for by you guys, so let me know in the comments what you think, but also let me know other places you'd like me to sketch. Be that somewhere you're excited to see, somewhere you want to sketch yourself or are having difficulty with, and I will do my best to do it in my style. Anyway, we are doing a sort of urban rural sketch today. Normal techniques, but actually what I want to do is show you it in a couple of different ways. So we're going to do what I love doing with these kind of scenes where you often encounter them, you know, walking a lovely cliff, a nice view, a mountain, and what I have the energy for and what I want to do then is a really quick ink sketch. So that's the first thing we'll do, a really quick ink sketch. The next thing we'll have a go at is a more abstract watercolour. We'll do an ink line, but underneath it we'll fill it with sort of abstract beautiful colours, and we'll get the essence of the place, but we'll also get, you know, again, a really quick technique for producing something really fun, really interesting, really beautiful. And then lastly, a slightly longer sketch. These are all going to be quick sketches, of course, but lastly, a slightly longer sketch where we'll do more my normal style, a bit of a continuous line here, a little bit of hatching there, and then a little touch of colour in, well, wherever's left. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at a really quick ink sketch. So just an ink version of this scene, which is of course Stonehenge, as we talked about. And the idea is here is the kind of sketch you might do if you're going for a walk and you just had 10 minutes to have a little picnic and you want to just do a 2-3 minute sketch. And I think that's a really lovely way of exploring these kind of urban, rural-y landscapes. So what I'm going to do is start towards the middle with something prominent so that we can build outwards and not miss too much out. So we've got this on the right, we've got some much closer, bigger stones. So let's just start to the right of the middle then. And I'm using a sort of a Tombow Fude pen, which I featured in a couple of sketches, both recently and last year as well. And it's a lovely way of, because it's so bold, but has a good variety of mark making options. So it's a lovely way of capturing really quick, vivid images. And all I'm going to do is these really rough outlines. You know, I'm sort of counting the stones, but I might have to squeeze some in, and that's okay. And I'm sort of aiming for accuracy, but I'm sort of going to feel okay if I have to, again, manipulate it a little bit and create, you know, my version of this image. And a little bit of sort of like hatching early on for the shadows and getting those. You see how there's a dark edge to all of these, and then there's a lighter side as well. So we can exaggerate that. So we can make our dark edge like a real shadow. The advantage of a Fude pen like this, or any sort of flexible marker or bold pen, is that you can really easily create those areas. And what we're doing by creating such high contrast, a simple sketch very quickly becomes very interesting. You're sort of guided around by these lovely bold bits of contrast. Can I move to the other half of the image? And we're kind of doing a bit of comparative measurement. So how tall is this one? Well, it's coming towards the top of this, but definitely below the top of that. How wide is it? It's probably the whole of this structure, so including the stone next to it, it's probably as wide as that stone. This next stone comes to the top there, but it finishes much higher. So we're just building our image by comparing between sides. Now this stuff is much more distant. It's smaller, more distant, so we can be a bit lighter with our marks, perhaps less obvious with the contrast. So here we've got very dark contrast, perhaps in this forward, this distant bit, we're just, a bit more gentle, the hatching's not quite as close together, that kind of thing. These closer rocks, we can make a bit more contrasted again, so that we know they are coming forward. And then we continue just working our way across. And what I'm just trying to do is turn these stones into 2D structures. So we have an edge and another side. So it's like looking on a box. You can almost always see at least 2 sides of the box, sometimes more. So what I should probably do really is add an underside to these ones as well, because that's the 3D, is being able to see the underneath them, and this little end we can see as well. And just by making things 3D, by giving them more than just a flat shape, it just becomes a much more sort of cultured sketch, I think. And it doesn't need much. We're talking like just the showings, the little suggestion of 2 sides. And there we go. So we got a slightly closer rock here as well. And another one there. And again, I probably, I've got some of these proportions wrong, haven't I? But, quick sketch. And I'm going to bring down these vertical lines, not worrying too much about the accuracy. And I'm going to connect, where it needs connecting, I'm going to connect up our horizon line. So as soon as we add in a horizon line here, and a little bit of sort of background, these hills and things, and just work out where we need that horizon line to join up, and suddenly we've actually got a proper full image instead of just some rocks sort of floating. If we want, we could keep working on this. We could add little textures. We can add, some of these have got sort of prominent horizontal lines which we could add in. There's little bits in the background that we can find, and you could just keep going for minutes. You could keep going, I'm sure you could keep going for hours. Maybe a nice fun touch in a quick ink sketch like this is just actually to find some of those clouds. We're not going to add colour, we've got this big white space. So why not find some of those clouds? And remember, clouds have got a kind of a perspective and a flow to them as well. So they're kind of all flowing out here and getting bigger and bigger as we go this way. They've also got shape, so they've got a bit of shadow. And you could do that with some the same hatching. Quite a nice way of doing it as well is by just creating more of these sort of flowing lines which emulate the edges of the cloud that you've made. And then keeping one side sort of unfinished so that you've got this idea of a really light area. And there you go. So we can call this Stonehenge 1. So this is a really quick, total of about 5-6 minutes ink sketch where we focused on shape, contrast, a lot of simplification, but just the kind of thing you could easily just go out and do on a little walk. So there's my version number 1. So we've done version number 1, and now version number 2. I'm going to use the same pen, and what we're going to do is we're going to do more of a sort of horizon line sketch, much less detail, but we're going to take that shape and apply some really loose abstract colour below it. So what do I mean? Well, if we just find this kind of horizon line, I'm going to work left to right this time, and I'm going to make it a little smaller than the sketch we just did. And this time, you might be able to tell I'm on some cold pressed watercolour paper, because that's going to give our watercolours, when we add them, some more interesting textures. And it doesn't have to be perfect, so we're not going for a full drawing, if you like. What we're doing is we're finding that kind of silhouette, and we can exaggerate a bit, so we can make this sort of rock in the middle, we can make it a little more imposing. We can exaggerate its taper at the bottom, and you'll notice I'm not really grounding any of these objects, so that's on purpose. So I'm trying to allow my colours, which I'm going to add, to flow down below this. Again, we can exaggerate this side. And with something a bit more abstract like this, it doesn't matter if things flow off the edge. So why don't we expand this side? So actually, even though I made it smaller over here, we're going to lose the stones. They're going to fall off the edge here. So what we can do, we can extend the horizon line there. We can extend this to here. And now our stones have fallen off the edge. And we'll just play with that idea with our colours as well. We can have this stone, maybe we taper it out, so it also continues that idea of falling off the edge. Now within this, perhaps we want a little bit of foreground detail, so we could get this foreground rock in. We could get, there's a rock which is way off to the side, but we could bring it in here, because, you know, why not? And then if we're happy with that outline, just reinforce it in a couple of places where it's not been quite continuous. So, you know, you've got some discontinuities. And there we go. Here's my normal selection of colours. I've got my little mop brush. I've got a large amount of water. And all I'm going to do is play with some abstraction. Now, I'm not going to abstract the grass. So you can see this pen is still a little bit, it is water fast, but because it lays down quite a thick amount of pigment, it needs a bit longer to dry. I had, to be honest, I had forgotten that, but I'm not bothered by it. I think we're doing abstract wash, and I actually think it'd be really interesting if we just let this colour do its thing, have it flowing around and having this ink joining it as well, and just being a little careful so it doesn't get too murky. So I'm just playing with a few different greens here, and so the grass is going to be, you know, going to be green. That will give us a little bit of grounding, a bit of understanding of what the image is supposed to be. These rocks, though, we're going to have more fun with. So if we now pick a colour, let's go for something moody. I've got a Perylene Violet here. Now that Perylene Violet I can drop into these more distant rocks, and I can just pull down. And I can do it maybe on this one as well. And then, because we've used lots of water and I'm using a big mop brush, notice how the colours are still blending and merging with those greens. Then we can pick another colour. So let's go, I've got a nice here, quinacridone sienna. Nice sort of rich browny colour. That can be on another of our little Neolithic stones. I'm sure there's a proper term for these, and it's just not coming to my head. So if in the comments you'd like to let me know, instead of rocks and stones, what I should be calling them, just remind me, that would be fantastic. And again, you see, I've not used a huge amount of water, but because I've used enough, we've got these colours still blending and merging, still nice and flexible. Let's go something even warmer now. So I've got a Mayan orange here, which is a kind of, it's actually quite a murky, almost reddy colour, really. Got a nice texture to it there as well, so we can touch that in, and again we'll just replicate it across a couple of positions in our little painting, our little sketch, and just dropping it in, just having a little play. That is all we're doing here. And then I want to do something bolder, so let's go into something a bit happier, a bit of cobalt, and we can do that in probably all the rest of our stones. So if I just drop that down, and we'll see, because there's only a few left really, isn't there? So now we've got that lovely blues, reds, oranges, all blending, merging, and we can start pushing those colours around a little bit more. Now don't overdo it, you know, just take your time, little touches. You can start bringing in richer touches of pigment, and if your paper's got enough water, all you're going to have to do is touch the paper and then it will do its thing. Equally, we can come in with some of, oh, that's the red again. So just cleaning my brush off to the side, we can get a bit more of our cobalt. Touch that in a couple of places. And then we can get, you know, what's not punching too much now. The quinacridone colours are not punching as much now, so let's get a bit more of that in. And then what else have we got left? So the greens have faded, haven't they? And that's all right because they're the foreground. But what we can do is we can just drop in some of these brighter greens. So this is green gold, which has got a lot of sort of a yellowy feel to it, and that will push up because we're adding something more concentrated, so it pushes everything out the way, and as it pushes up it will create even more interesting effects. And now we've got a sort of decision to make. We've got this huge sky, and there's lots of different things we could do. Now, one option would be to add colour, but we've got so much colour going already, we kind of risk overdoing it. So what I'm going to do actually is use my pen again. Before that, I'm just touching in a few shadows, and even when we're being abstract, it's, you know, it's fine. Of course, it's fine, but it's good, I would say, to suggest some shape, so we can bring back suggestions of shape just by some really simple application of shadow. And I'm using a Perylene Violet with a little bit of indigo here, just for that shadow colour. And again, we can get shadows in suggested places. So now, like I said, we could do something different. We could do something, instead of colour, we could use our pen. I'm actually going to come in with my fountain pen now, so we get a more fine and controlled line. And I'm going to hatch. And what I'm going to do is just a series of, for me, relatively neat vertical lines. I'm not saying this is like a world-endingly brilliant art technique, but hopefully you'll agree as it builds up that it's quite an interesting look, quite a graphic look, and certainly it offsets, you know, what we've got going on elsewhere. It offsets that very loose flowing colour. So there you go. Obviously I sped that up a little bit in places, but now we've got this really fascinating image. Last bits we can of course do with our pen is, I'm going to use the same pen again, because now that paper's wet, as we add ink it's going to be much bolder, so it's going to be very similar to the Fudo pen we were using before. And what we could do, we can go around and we can neaten up some of these edges, and in places that ink's going to flow into the water, and that's fine because that just adds to that sort of abstracted effect we created. The only difficulty is going to be when my pen gets upset with me for putting it in too much water. So just go and enliven it again on another piece of paper and keep going round. And what we want really, what I would like, is to have the outlines of our rocks, of our scene, our sort of silhouette. I'd like that to be just bolder. Not dramatically so, but definitely a little bolder than the sort of hatching lines that we've done in the sky. So that they're definitely sort of structural lines versus non-structural lines. Structural versus sort of background. And of course, having done that, there's always, you know, if you want, there's always little extra watercolour touches you can do. So things will be a bit drier now. So what we could do is use some little splashes in, and they'll produce a slightly different texture because things are a bit dry. They're not going to flow as much. Still going to flow a bit, just not as much. So we can take some of the nice rich colours, maybe a bit of the cobalt, bit of that quinacridone sienna, and we can just even more abstract it. Fill in maybe some of these gaps. And avoid doing too much. So the problem with watercolour is it's always tempting to keep going until eventually you shouldn't have So I'm going to stop after this bit of green and call that my sketch number 2. Abstract, flowing, interesting. Again, something you could so easily just sit there and do in the moment. And that's it done. So sketches 1 and 2 done. Let's move on to sketch number 3. And of course we are now on to sketch number 3. So let's do it a little bit differently again. Perhaps this time we'll change our framing of the scene. So instead of having our whole scene, why don't we do something a bit niche but interesting? Why don't we squish it off to one side and just take it as a sort of object pushing in? And I'm going to use a fine liner this time, 0.2mm fine liner. And again, this is some sort of lightly textured cold pressed paper. And I'm going to do more of a continuous line drawing. More, again, this is getting much closer to my normal style. And we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at some hatching, and really we're going to be finding shapes and having a play. So pushing this image off to one side, we can make things a little bigger. We can also focus again on shapes. So first we find the big shapes. We've got this rock's a kind of something like a parallelogram, maybe a bit of a triangle to its side. And it doesn't matter if we get the shapes a bit wrong. We're just finding ideas. We can see that in this big rock, now that we're zooming in, we can see it's got like a little arch in it. We can see that there's a dark face, which is kind of like a rectangle, a triangle pushing off to one side. And then we can go up and we can grab the rest of it, which is, basically a rectangle, isn't it? But with wobbly edges. And we can find that it's got a side. So we're splitting the image into different planes. So we got the plane at the side, the plane at the front, the planes being like faces, different faces of a cube, really. And then we keep going. So move back again, and in fact, don't move back yet. We need to move back and join up this edge. Something I missed. Little nugget on top there. Come round, keep our line going, because why not? Then in the background, it's kind of a 2D shape because of how far away it is, but it's standing stone underneath is more 3D, so we get its 2 planes in. It's also almost got a little plane underneath here where it's got a deep shadow. We can join it to the next one. Again, it's got a definite side to it, but it's also got a kind of triangle coming out the side there, and it goes straight to the next one, which has got little ones in the front of it. I think it's difficult to see, but when something's difficult to see, that means it's going to be difficult to see in the photo and difficult to see in our sketch, and that's fine. So we sketch what we see. And what do I see there? I see some lines going down, I see some lines going across, there's a square, there's a triangle. So no need to be clever, just sketch what you see. Don't invent it. If there might be a little thing there, there might not. So I haven't tried to sketch a little stone, I've just tried to sketch the shapes I see. And then we come up to the front here, we've got this big one. And it's got a sort of friend pushing in the side, and I quite like the shape of them together. And again, it's got this kind of plane, this face going that way, just kind of triangle, and then it's got like this area here, little deep line there, and then it's got these rocks in the front, which just again simple shape. So slither of a triangle, which is the top, then it's got a sort of front and then a circle coming around to this bigger one, which can come to the bottom of our image, and that can be where our image finishes. Now you have a look, and have we missed stuff? Of course we've missed stuff. I don't know why I keep saying we. It's me who's missing stuff, but I'm sort of socialising my errors. And we bring that around. We just can sort of continue our line really, and just create a feel of that continuous line, joining everything up. And then we can come across with this kind of field in the distance, and we can even suggest, I don't know if they're people probably or animals, but something there sort of standing. And then we've got another horizon line here. So by changing our what's the word? By changing our composition, by zooming in, we suddenly got all this extra bit of detail. The image becomes quite different. I know the style's different, but the image is also different just by the nature of how we've chosen to focus on different aspect of it. Because now we can see there's actually two horizon lines here. We've got this one, we've got this one as well. We just need to again make sure they're connected all through the image. There's another one here we need to find, and then the image makes sense. Now this is my sort of continuous line version, but I also want to explore the idea of some hatching in this. So let's use our hatching to separate out those planes again a bit more. So we've got obvious areas which are dark. We've got here. And all I'm going to do is really quickly, in these darker areas, apply a simple sort of scrub of hatching, and we'll find some stones again that I've missed out. Little one in the background that I've missed out. And we can suggest shadows where we want to just invent them. But also what we do, so this stone is actually darker than the one in front, but also this is another plane. So we're separating it out, both planes which are facing different ways, but also planes which are literally in different parts of the image, foreground, midground, background. And by doing that, we're just adding texture and interest and making it easier for the viewer to pull their eye around the image. So we can make this other plane even darker, and then this stone in the back can be similar to this one because it's in the same area. Then we've got this shade underneath here. So we kind of, as we move through our three different types of sketch, we're applying different techniques but very similar concepts. So similar concepts of simplifying, of course, similar concepts of shape, but different ways of making it then interesting, so making it art beyond just a replica image. And you don't have to hatch everywhere. So look, there's loads going on here. Why don't we just experiment and we leave that? No hatching here. So we've suddenly got this funny area of our image which doesn't quite make sense. But that's okay as well. It's making people make decisions for themselves as well. And we can always go back and hatch it. So we can leave it now and regret our decision. But if we hatch it and we wish we hadn't been so representative, we wanted to be a bit more abstract, well, you can't take it back, unfortunately. What else could we do? Well, look, we've got these different planes. We've got the stones, which are kind of a fore and a midground. Then we've got the background here. But what we could do is we could apply real contrast. So we've got these trees. We could do some real dense hatching. We're almost blocking in, but trying to leave a little gap between some of those lines. So now we've got these kind of other areas which our eyes are pulled to. We can add in some trees just to enable us to keep that consistent across all of our sort of horizon line. And if we want, we could add a little more. We could do some loose horizontal hatching within that plane as well. And again, that just unifies that whole plane. Now our eye scans across and it sees this must all be the same thing because it's got the same motifs, it's got the same features. And I think that's enough for our line work. A bit longer, again, though very much something we could easily have done, sat here having a look, zooming our eyes in or sitting closer or whatever. Now what I'm going to do with this is use a slightly different brush. This is a size 12 round brush. It's quite a small size 12. I would really, in most brands I'd say it's probably about a size 8. And what we're going to do is be quite selective with our colour. So we've got this lovely sky. And we'll start with that. We'll start with a little bit of sky, but not the whole sky, just bring that colour down. And you can see my water, I've been painting a couple of hours now, so the water's got a little bit of tone to itself already. That's fine by me, but just beware of that kind of thing if you're doing your own sketching. If you want this crystal clear colours, change your water, clean your brushes. And I'm going to just splash in. I've got some cobalt to splash in there. And I'm going to fill in some of these gaps as well. And then I'm going to add into that a touch of Moonglow. Lovely colour which separates and adds a real interest to the painting. Adds a bit of mood, suggests some clouds. I might even go quite heavy on it in a couple of places. And what we can do to make it more interesting, if I just grab a tissue, scrunch it up and use it just to pull out a bit of texture, remove some of that water. And then we can come back in. You know, the lovely thing about watercolour is, well, it's wet, you can move it so much. You can layer and glaze and things. We can join up some of these areas where we've removed. And we'll leave it like that for now. Now the next bit is I'm going to be selective with what happens underneath. I'm going to tilt my page a little bit. I'm going to take some of that Moonglow. I'm going to let it come down. I'm going to join up my image. And I often talk about this idea of water bridges. I love linking aspects with this kind of feel. And as you can see, the sky's moved quite a lot, so I can just go back and be like, you know what, now that the sky's flowed down, I can reinvigorate it in a couple of places. And we use this kind of bluey, moonglowy feel just in these places I've hatched to provide subtle idea of shadow. And then, similar to before, we can take these lovely greens and we can do the kind of abstract colour. And it can flow into the sky, it can flow into the middle ground. Then we can decide, you know, what feel are our rocks going to have. Let's start with a little bit of our Peruvian violet again. That might be quite similar to the sky, and it is indeed probably a bit too similar. So I'm going to come in with some sepia, which is going to be a nice shadow colour. Again, quite similar to the sky, but now it doesn't have that same sort of cool feel. So it's a similar but different. And what we know is, again, we're painting with water. So we can touch in this colour, this sepia in a few places, just to get that cool feeling removed without having done anything, you know, irreversible. And then let's take something different. So quinacridone gold, and just touch that in and let that move around. And now our rocks really feel different, but they've got character. They flow, they move around. They're part of the landscape. They're glowing. And we can take that quinacridone and do some splashing, suggesting. And we can come back in again with a bit more. Let's get our Moonglow and, you know, reinvigorate some of these shadowed areas. Just relink things, make that sky moody again. Find a bit of our blue and make our sky bright again, and just be gentle, keep pushing and moving things around. And hopefully you recognise what I'm doing as very similar to how I would paint an urban scene. So very similar ideas. Pushing, moving around and just having a bit of fun. And I'm going to leave the colours there. Let this dry. We'll see what it looks like, and just like with urban scenes, probably add a tiny bit more pen work to just bring it together. We are back, and as you can see, the colours have, as watercolours do, faded. Things are sort of become a little less punchy. And that's what we expect. So what we're going to do, we're going to come back first with our same fine liner and perhaps just refine some of these lines. And when we've done that, and all I'm doing is really quickly, same sort of idea of continuous line, I'm just going over some of those key lines. When we've done that, we'll be able to see perhaps do we want a bit more of a punch of colour somewhere, or what's missing basically. And by doing it step by step, by not rushing ahead, it means we can always just stop and not have gone too far. I don't think we need to do too much with our penwork here. Hopefully you can see that as we get some of these lines bold again, it's just pushing things forward. So we're kind of having these standing stones, and I think I've just discovered what the word I was missing earlier. They're standing stones, aren't they? But having these standing stones just lift forward, come towards us. Remember this set of shapes from earlier, this set of lines? Again, just going over those lines, having them come forwards, kind of shows you a bit more, I think. You start to have a look and go, what can we add? And for me, I'm now thinking, well, this is a lovely background of colour. I actually really like the line drawing. We're just missing a punch of something just to sort of next level it, to just give it a little bit of flair. And it might be as simple as a few splashes. So start off with a few splashes, and then maybe that's not enough. So just come in, and it's this warm colour that I felt could just have a little more sort of say in our image. And so this warm colour, of course, being a bit of quinacridone gold, this quinacridone deep gold, so it's got a much sort of more full-bodied feel. We can add that in, and I've cleaned my brush off, and we can come and soften that colour around so that we haven't just added a load of hard edges into our lovely sketch. And already that's a bit, it's got a bit more of something. And I think the other thing is we want to just pull some of this background colour away from this sky. So a bit of my Perylene Violet, which has got a different tone. It's got a very different feel to this moon glow, although it's a similar kind of colour, and if you were to describe it, it's quite similar. Actually, I think for me it's got the mood it exudes is quite different. So just a few little touches, just a few tiny touches of this, and I think we'll suddenly get a bit more contrast, not just in terms of the value, high value and low value, dark shadow, light shadow, or no shadow, but also contrast in terms of the warmth and the kind of colours that we're seeing. And we can use this to be a bit neater, perhaps, so we could take some quite strong pigment and just find some of these gaps. We can sort of find these little shapes. So, for example, up here we've got this circle where we can just add that colour in there. It's an interesting little way of providing a punch of colour without overdoing it. And that's what I talked about at the beginning, was just a few touches of colour here and there, not overdoing it. Tiny bit more cobalt, and I think again this is done. So 3 very different versions now all done. I'm going to pop Stonehenge on there, and I hope you've enjoyed that. So let's have a little think about what we've achieved and go to the conclusion. So there we go. 3 different versions, very different versions, I think, although I think they all look very much like my art at the same time. I'd love to know what you guys think. What's your favourite 1, 2 or 3, both to look at but also to do. So have a go, join in, or do it in your style. And of course, if you do want to do it in your style, if you want to do it in my style, share with me. So just tag me on Instagram, or even send me an email, get in touch via my website. If you enjoy my videos as well here, please do like and subscribe. And it's a pleasure, joining you for these regular little sketching sessions. Here's a bit which needs to touch.